Michoacán, one of the most beautiful states in Mexico, known for its ancient Purépecha culture, artisan towns, pine forests, and lakes, has also spent the last 2 decades living under a shadow. A shadow cast not by one single group, but by a constant rotation of criminal organizations, each fighting for territory, resources, and power. Among the many names that have surfaced in this turbulent history, few have become as symbolic or as elusive as Ángel Chávez Ponce, the man known as El Camaleón. His story is not just the story of one criminal, it is the story of a region where criminal organizations became woven into the social fabric, where loyalties shifted as fast as the landscape itself, and where one man learned to adapt, survive, and disappear. To understand El Camaleón, we have to begin long before he earned that nickname. We begin in the highlands and valleys of Michoacán, in the Zona Lacustre, the lake region around Pátzcuaro, Quiroga, and Tzintantzin. These are places rich with tradition, marketplaces full of carved wood, copper crafts, and the famous Day of the Dead celebrations on Janitzio Island. But beneath the beauty, these communities have often lived in the middle of political absence. For decades, people here have worked the land, sold crafts, raised cattle, and survived on tourism, yet have been largely left to fend for themselves when it comes to security. Growing up in this environment, Ángel Chávez Ponce learned early the difference between the official law and the practical one. The law enforced by whoever controlled the roads, the forests, the markets. This was the late 1990s and early 2000s. Back then, La Familia Michoacana was emerging as a powerful force. They positioned themselves as moral enforcers, defenders of communities against outsiders, even distributing their own pseudo-religious codes of conduct. In reality, they were building a criminal empire based on extortion, kidnapping, and drug trafficking. Later came their successor, the Caballeros Templarios, who doubled down on the idea of being protectors of the land while using violence to dominate towns. As a teenager and young adult in this environment, Chávez Ponce wouldn't have had many options. Stories from locals in similar communities describe a familiar pattern. The cartel arrives, recruits local youth, pressures families, offers money, or forces compliance. Some join out of fear. Others join because it offers a path, however dangerous, in places where legitimate opportunities are scarce. In a world where the state was distant, where police rotated constantly, and where criminal groups acted as the de facto authority, young Ángel learned how to move between these forces. People later said he had a gift. He could blend in, adapt, and shift allegiances without drawing too much attention. He learned the terrain, the people, the local economy, skills that would serve him later. By the early 2000s, after years of internal wars, the Templarios began to fracture. Smaller groups emerged, including Los Viagras, a faction that originally presented itself as a community defense organization before evolving into a powerful criminal entity. During this time, Chávez Ponce began to appear in intelligence reports associated with kidnapping cells, though never in a leading role. The first public allegation connected to him emerged in 2014 when a businessman from Uruapan was kidnapped. The case didn't lead to a conviction, but it placed him into the criminal spotlight for the first time. But the moment that truly changed his trajectory came in 2019, with the kidnapping and murder of Hugo Figueroa, nephew of the well-known singer Joan Sebastian. The kidnapping happened during a jaripeo, a rodeo-style event, in Arroyo de Rosales. Armed men entered, caused panic, and abducted Figueroa. In front of hundreds days later, he was found dead. Investigators linked the crime to a local cell with connections to Chavez Ponce. Whether he planned it, facilitated it, or simply operated within the same structure, the association put him firmly into the public narrative. It was from this moment that his name began to appear frequently in intelligence briefings. Meanwhile, Michoacán itself was shifting again. Around 2020, a new wave of self-defense groups appeared, among them Pueblos Unidos, claiming to protect farmers and local merchants from extortion. Some members were genuine community defenders. Others were aligned with criminal groups. It was during this fluid moment, when groups claimed legitimacy but carried guns and controlled territory, that Chavez Ponce moved between factions. First tied to Los Viagras, then to Pueblos Unidos, he was able to stay relevant, protected, and useful. Then came the turning point, the aggressive push by the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, CJNG, into Michoacán. CJNG sought expansion, establishing corridors through the state, moving from Jalisco across Michoacán's mountain ranges. They needed locals, people who understood the land, who knew the populations, who could serve as intermediaries. And according to multiple reports, around 2022 to 2023, Angel Chavez Ponce made his final and most consequential shift. He aligned with CJNG. Within CJNG, he took on a more structured role. He wasn't a top figure nationally, far from it. But he became a regional coordinator in the Lake Zone. He oversaw local cells, managed extortion routes, acted as a communication point between towns, and became a symbol of CJNG's growing presence near Pátzcuaro, Salvador Escalante, and the surrounding areas. His ability to adapt, reinvent, and shift identity earned him the nickname that would define him: El Camaleón, the chameleon. In early 2024, federal forces captured him in Aguascalientes. The arrest made headlines, but confusion followed. Authorities described him as part of Los Viagras, even though more recent intelligence tied him to CJNG. This revealed how complex his allegiances had been. But the most shocking part was not the arrest. It was what happened next. He was released later that year. Critics pointed to systemic problems: weak investigations, legal loopholes, corruption, or misalignment between federal and state agencies. Whatever the cause, the result was the same. El Camaleón returned to Michoacán, more determined and more dangerous than before. Following his release, everything escalated. In March 2024, a brutal ambush took the life of Cristal Garcia Hurtado, a respected regional police commander in Pátzcuaro. Along with members of her escort, authorities tied the hit to CJNG collaborators linked to Chavez Ponce. This crime shook the security forces deeply. Garcia Hurtado was not a minor officer. She was a symbol of law enforcement presence in the area. Her killing, added to the growing violence and extortion in the region, pushed Chavez Ponce into the category of priority target under the national plan Michoacán. During 2025, violence surged again. CJNG's expansion clashed with resistance from Los Viagras, Pueblos Unidos remnants, and local armed groups. Rural communities saw increased intimidation. Businesses faced extortion pressures. Gunfire echoed in areas where tourism once lived peacefully. It was clear to authorities that removing regional commanders like El Camaleón was essential to weakening CJNG's grip. Then came November 17, 2025, the day of the major operation intended to capture him just before dawn. A coordinated movement of the Mexican Army, state police, and federal intelligence teams advanced toward La Cantera, a rural zone in Salvador Escalante. Intelligence sources believed Chavez Ponce had spent the night in one of the safe houses hidden among pine forests and dirt trails. The plan was to surround the zone, close off exits, and force him out. Residents woke up to the sound of helicopters flying low overhead. Military convoys moved along narrow roads. For a brief moment, it appeared the authorities had the element of surprise. But CJNG, like many modern organized crime groups, had developed an extensive network of lookouts. Young men stationed on hillsides, farms, and strategic points, paid to report every police movement within minutes the cartel reacted. Across Michoacán, from Pátzcuaro and Tzintzuntzan to Morelia's outskirts, Zamora and La Piedad, cartel cells launched a massive disruption campaign. They hijacked vehicles, forced drivers out at gunpoint, and set buses, trucks, and cars on fire. The burning vehicles became roadblocks, narco-bloqueos, choking highways, isolating towns, and slowing reinforcements. Plumes of black smoke rose into the sky as highways turned into chaos. Schools locked down, businesses closed, families sheltered in their homes, and social media filled with videos of the burning streets. For the military, every delayed minute mattered. The goal had been to encircle the area around La Cantera quickly, but the blockades forced units to reroute, re-coordinate, and move more cautiously. Meanwhile, CJNG gunmen engaged Army personnel in at least 3 clashes, further slowing the advance. By the time forces reached the specific zone where they believed Chavez Ponce had been hiding, the safe house was empty. El Camaleón had already disappeared into the countryside, escaping through rural routes, forest trails, and terrain he had known his entire life. Authorities later acknowledged the operation had failed in its primary objective. Several cartel members were detained. At least 2 were killed. Vehicles burned across the state. But the man at the center of the operation had slipped away again. His escape reinforced a painful truth. The conflict in Michoacán was far from over. In the aftermath, the government kept forces deployed throughout the region, attempting to restore order. But CJNG also reorganized. Los Viagras resisted. Other smaller groups saw opportunities to grow. The state became a chessboard of moving pieces, alliances, betrayals, and constant tension. Communities continued to face extortion. Rural towns saw armed men passing through at night. Farmers paid protection fees to stay safe, and residents lived between government patrols and cartel checkpoints. Today, the war in Michoacán continues, not as a single battle, but as a long, grinding conflict made of dozens of small confrontations, constant pressure on communities, and the silent fear of being caught between rival forces. El Camaleón remains a fugitive, his location unknown, his network wounded but not dismantled. His story is not a story of power. It is a story of the challenges that arise when criminal organizations fill the vacuum where institutions fail to protect the people. And so the legend of El Camaleón continues, not because of who he is, but because of what Michoacán has become. A place where criminal groups act as shadow governments, where communities live in the middle of a conflict they did not choose, and where one man's ability to adapt reflects the broader survival strategies of entire regions. This story, his story, is a reminder that until deep structural issues are addressed, until communities feel safe, protected, and supported, figures like El Camaleón will continue to emerge, move through the shadows, and escape even the most coordinated attempts to capture them. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps Shadowline continue creating deep-dive true crime content. Share your thoughts or case suggestions in the comments. Shadowline reads every one. Subscribe for more true crime.